This is Room in the Trees, a podcast about living a creative life. Room in the Trees is hosted by Trent Reynolds and me, Sabrina Ward Harrison.
Show notes, including pictures, links, video, and more for every episode, can be found at roominthetrees.com.
You can follow us on Instagram at Sabrina Ward Harrison and at Trent Reynolds Art. And now, here's this week's episode.
Well, we are so excited to have you in the house, Matey Rose, Wabi Sabi.
Yeah, same.
Yes.
I was telling Trent that I'm nervous and honored because this is like my favorite podcast.
Oh,
I love the depth that you go in about your art practice. I don't think there are other podcasts like that where you get really detailed about what you're going through and then tangential at the same time. It's good. And it makes me laugh.
You never know what you're going to get.
And I love the shout out about The Bachelor.
Right? So Matey and I have this kind of secret, not even secret, but just we have a connection because we're 1 day apart in age. Our birthdays are 1 day apart. And we also love The Bachelor. Not even so much watching it, just listening to recaps.
Yeah.
In a slightly manic way.
I so wish I could be on like some phone call where you guys are totally geeking out about what's going down with the Bachelor.
Trent, you are here.
Yeah.
Let it begin. Let it begin. What's going on with Pilot? Is it Pilot
Pete.
Joe?
Pilot Pete.
Pilot Pete. What's going on with Pilot Pete? I want you guys to give it to me, like give it unfiltered.
Okay.
Oh,
as hard as you can.
Okay, we will.
Let's go deep Pilot Pete for just a little bit here.
Okay.
oh, goodness.
That makes me so excited. I'm like sweating because we haven't spoken about it this year. We haven't like been on the phone talking about it, but my gosh, we could go in any direction. We can talk Victoria P. We can talk this whole Matey thing. We can talk the fact it hasn't been spoiled by Reality Steve yet.
Oh, Reality Steve. That's right.
I love how you were talking about it last pod, but just making the comparison to, like watching boxing or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But just, I was noticing how my boyfriend was totally geeking out watching boxing and just like relaxing during that. And I was like, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Watching the women tell all.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I think they're too young.
Yeah, this year.
I haven't gotten to know any of them and they don't know themselves. And so I am so happy. You heard who the Bachelorette is.
Yeah, Claire Crawley. Yeah.
Yeah. She's 38.
Yep.
She has been in many relationships. She knows herself. It's going to be good.
So Trent, they go between Bachelorette, Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor.
Mm-hmm.
Season to season, and there's these in between the two. There's Bachelor in Paradise, which is the summer season where all the people that got voted off or discarded show up in this like beach situation where everyone kind of is incestuous and dates, and it's just very. But they're all doing it for social media. Is the whole thing is disgusting, but kind of.
No.
But it's like.
Honestly, my least favorite because I think of their ages.
Yeah. Yep.
It just seems really scattered and dramatic between them.
Yeah.
So
but other
you
episodes
guys
are really good.
Are you liking Pete? I mean, what about Pete? Do you guys even really think about Pete that much? Is it more about like the competition between the women? Like,
I think it's more about the women.
Yeah.
He seems like a nice guy, but he's not very interesting to me. What about you, Sabrina?
Yeah, not interesting. The least interesting, I think, and also Colton, the last guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying his name.
That is so
lame.
tremendously yeah.
Colton.
Pete
Sounds like a soap opera. Colton.
Well, I also think it's changing because all of the women want to be Instagram influencers, and so there's a different.
Yeah.
It used to, I think, be a little bit more pure, and now it's about fame.
Did you watch it on Netflix? The great, the one that's the.
Love is Blind.
Oh, I watched Love Is Blind for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
fascinating.
Yeah.
They, sorry,
I
Trent.
know.
No, this is
I know.
great.
Love is Blind. They talk to each other, don't see each other, and fall in love with each other like through a wall.
Oh,
Love
dear.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the Olympics of relationships, right? It's like, how can we like put up some kind of tension surrounding relationship and make it impossible? And I mean, this is like relationship sports, right?
It is. It's shameful to admit that you love The Bachelor, and then when you find your kindreds, it's so exciting because then you can just go deep.
And what I love is that we're both like these professional, full-time working artists that have so much stuff going on, and like we're juggling all this stuff, and somehow we're like on my little windows off to kind of like decompress. I'm like, oh my God, Bachelor.
It is such a guilty pleasure, and when I'm watching it, I have a smile from ear to ear. I'm just so incredibly happy.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's good times. Did you hear that they're having a seniors bachelor?
Yes.
There's now casting if you have a grandparent.
Yeah.
Oh my
or
goodness.
Parent, I guess. We're old enough.
Yeah.
What am I saying?
Yeah. My mom could go on.
Yeah, same. Well, my parents are married, but.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sabrina, I think you should introduce Mady and give us a little background.
Yeah.
How do you guys know each other?
So Mady and I met in Berkeley in San Francisco, right?
Yes.
Maybe I met you.
I had this serendipitous, I think I've told this story before, where I had found your book. My ex-husband had your book. He was a graphic designer. And like a week after I was reading your book, I saw that you had open studios in Berkeley.
Let's give the context of what year this probably was.
When was it? Like 2000? It was early days.
Yeah. 2002.
Yeah. Maybe.
It was after 9/11.
Maybe 2001. Because I maybe it was 2002.
Yeah. I'd moved back from New York. I'd moved back from New York City, so it would have to be 2002. Yeah.
Okay. Because it was a small window right before my ex and I went to Mexico for like 6 months.
All right.
And so I met you, and it was so incredible, just the timing of having your open studios, and I had on a butterfly dress and you complimented it, and I was like, oh my goodness, here's the artist. And I was just such a fan, and it was such resonant work. And then the next week you had a live class. And so I ended up taking it, and it was super magical. We were on the grass writing and creating. I think you made some pasta salad.
I love that detail, the pasta salad.
Mm-hmm. I was like,
do you remember, was there a dressing on the pasta salad? Do you remember the experience?
Probably like ranch. I don't know. It was good. It was classy.
I would think it was like, I think it was probably
olive oil.
Yeah, olive oil. Lois Harrison recipe, probably.
Fast forward, I ended up having an art studio in the same space in Berkeley, probably 10 years later, and having a studio where then I ran classes, and it was totally inspired by that moment. And I co-ran the studio with another woman who had been in your class, Stephanie Renee, who was a photographer. I don't know if you got that whole connection, but super magic. And you were such a catalyst, because I ended up going back to the California College of the Arts and just there were all these synchronicities. And then our birthdays.
Yeah, and then I ended up renting a studio in the studio complex in San Francisco that you had your apartment and a studio in, and it was just the coolest space. It was like this little secret, the way San Francisco is so cool that way, where behind the doors, you go through and then suddenly there's like a courtyard with all these funky little complex like studio spaces, and you would have loved it, Trent.
Oh my gosh. I went there last weekend and I was just walking around and I peeked in the window and they have the same color paint inside.
Wow.
It was so cool.
In your old apartment.
Great color paint on the living room wall. It was called Love Affair. It was like this deep aubergine brown. It was cool. Anyway, they still have it. It was such a flashback.
Had you guys painted that color?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Living with another artist, we had painted all the walls. But yeah, in Sabrina, there was lots of good times, but I remember you had like the most epic studio, right?
Yeah.
It was like such an installation. And maybe a little bit of a fire hazard. I don't know.
It was wild. Oh my God.
I just remember going in and you'd be like, hey, can you help me? And you'd be like standing on like the edge of a desk with like a million things scattered.
Those are some crazy times.
Some crazy times.
I was also at that point starting to go down and live along the Central Coast and be down. I was in my True Living project. It was beginning, and I was super passionate about like.
Yeah, it was so exhilarating having you in that studio space. We shared it with a handful of other artists who were. It was such a great community. It was really inspiring to be there. It's called Compound 21. It still exists with different artists. And I remember one day there was a taco truck around the corner. And you'd like just like go get tacos and
I can taste them from here. There was a little hole in the wall. I don't think was it a truck, but there was one that was like just literally a hole, like a little window in the wall on the side on the road.
Right, where they had locos and
those were good.
Eyes and tongue. I just remember having like picnics in the courtyard.
Yes.
It was pretty great.
And that was before social media.
It was social media. I miss that. Just like the lack of comparison.
Yeah, just being right where you were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was getting really into spray painting over doilies during that time period. So I would just like spray paint
into that. Yeah.
over the doilies to make really cool patterns and get like high off the fumes. Oh my God, I feel like I'm talking about like Woodstock.
It totally feels like, reminiscing about
the Wabi Sabi days.
They were great.
And we celebrated our 30th birthday together. That was so fun.
Yeah.
So, Mati, I read on your website that you went back into art after not thinking that it was a practical direction, or like, how did you come?
It still doesn't feel very practical, but I felt, and Sabrina was totally part of this path and inspiration, but I had been working at an art law firm. I was always, I minored in painting in college the first time and just always worked for arts organizations. I mean, I was, I think 26. So it wasn't like, I'd done that much work, but I'd been working at an art law firm and I got laid off because of the .com crash, the tech crash. I was saying that word .com the other day to a Lyft driver, and he's like, "Excuse me?" I was like, I'm dating myself. But so I got laid off and I had 6 months living on unemployment, where I started volunteering at art galleries, and I had my first art show in that time period, and then met Sabrina and took her class and some other classes. I was really into kids books at that time, so I was taking tons of kids books and kids book classes at UC Berkeley Extension, and then went to Oaxaca, Mexico with my ex and built up my portfolio, and came back and went to CCA and waitressed a lot during that time period. But yeah, it didn't seem practical, especially with all the student debt. And I think it's interesting, like at this time, I don't regret school. That was such a great experience. But at this time with social media, I don't know if it would be necessary. But at that time, it seemed like that was the only way to meet people and network and get into galleries.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting to think of, that one of the huge benefits or functions that going to college provided was network, right? And how it's becoming even more practical now to not make that be your primary source of connecting with people, right?
Right.
That seems like it's probably one of the reasons why people aren't as intense about going to college.
I think you're right. There's this whole digital economy. Trent, you got your MFA, right?
I did.
And was that before Instagram?
Yep. Man, when did I graduate? I think I graduated in 2006 or 7.
Yeah, that's the same time period I was in school too.
So yeah, definitely before social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even imagine, like, I'm trying to place social media back into my experience there. It would be so different.
Yeah.
No.
It'd be so different.
I think I
had a fantastic experience. I'm totally glad I went,
Right. There's still value in art school. I just, I feel grateful for that time and space and growth, but I am still paying those loans, and that's kind of hard.
When I think about being in art school like that, I'm so grateful because we just were right in the experience with our teachers and our fellow students, and and our references were mostly historical artists, at least maybe from a generation before us, or it really wasn't this comparing thing. And I felt like we just on the history level really learning things in the context of history versus just this immediacy of really like education that really sunk in deeply.
Right.
That's a really interesting point. Like I hadn't thought about that. Students now, with the accessibility to so much imagery, that their points of reference, their inspirations aren't the images from art history or ideas from art history. They're like looking at so and so's Instagram feed, looking for inspiration. Where I don't know. I had the fortunate opportunity to go and walk through a museum when I was looking for inspiration. That's interesting. So their foundation and their, I guess, point of reference, I think is the right word for it, does not have that history.
Yeah.
Or it seems like it would anyway.
Yeah, those days were just delicious to be like for me in art history classes and just it up. Yeah.
Mati, you had this big life change, lost your job, and so it was kind of a natural time to try something new. At that point, did you consider yourself an artist, or do you even now consider yourself an artist? Was it an evolution?
It was definitely an evolution. And I think in the beginning, I remember that gallery that I volunteered at, and then was, they gave me a show. That definitely felt like this coming out period of like, I am an artist, and then going back to school. And I think that's a common phase. Did you guys go through that where you feel like you're claiming being an artist? But I had always been an artist, but that felt very empowering.
I think it's hard for a lot of people to know, to feel like you got that kind of imposter syndrome where you feel like you're not the real deal somehow.
Right. It's hard to think back to that because it's been so long now. But I remember at the beginning saying I was an artist felt really scary.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to remember, especially as a teacher, that other people are going through that. And it's our job to help them, to usher that inner artist out.
Mm-hmm. That is, there's something there that I want to poke at a little bit. Like as teachers of art, part of our identity, I guess, or I think what Sabrina does really well, and maybe I would guess this is something that you do well as well, just looking at your website, is to start to help people create a sense of identity as an artist or as a creative person, right? a lot of people come to art workshops, I imagine, are looking for somebody to give them permission to own that, or, or to become that, or to adopt that identity. Have you guys experienced that?
Yeah, I feel like Sabrina is such a pioneer in helping other women in particular to like come into their own and claim their voices. And I remember in particular your workshop where you had us do a lot of writing exercises, which I feel like is such a great way to kind of tap into your inner artist, and writing lists of memories from childhood. And so I think in my classes, I try to build the framework so that people can tap into their unique voices instead of just mimicking what I'm doing. And there are ways that I do that, like using, my painting classes, like little prompts that are like, use your non-dominant hand, or use like make small marks with a small brush, or use a big brush, or use white, or whatever the thing is. But like ways to respond to your own art, I think is really helpful. Because you see a lot of people taking classes and then their work just looks like the teacher, and that's okay, especially in the beginning, right? To do that. But then I think it's really, at least personally, it's really exciting when I feel like I've made something that's unique and hasn't been, probably everything has been done, but
I think people can kind of sense that, when they're mimicking somebody else, that it's not their own, that they haven't owned it. And when they finally make something that they do feel is honestly theirs, there's a lot of power in that. That's a very empowering thing.
Right. They're expressing their voice. And yeah, I think Sabrina, you and I probably work in a similar manner that's very like spontaneous and reacting to different things. And I almost like to set up situations in my studio where I am reacting to something versus like using, my painting as a palette, so then that I can go back and react to it.
Yeah, totally.
Like a way in. Or like lately, this sounds really trippy. I put this on Instagram, but I have been working outside. I have a little studio that's a little studio shed that's in the woods, and leaves were falling on my paintings and pebbles were getting on them, and I was like, that looks really good, and I felt like I was co-creating with nature. Like, thanks.
Yeah,
that composition is rocking.
Yeah, I love that.
But having it out of my hands even more.
Yeah. And I feel like you really appreciate the light that way when you're working with light and sunlight and not coming through your work.
Right. And it's a real observation of time and creating. And like, you could never make that same painting a half an hour later, right? The light would be different. The inspiration would be different. You would be different.
One thing I really appreciate and have loved about Mati is that she's been someone who's an example of where she really is so open and supportive and encouraging of other female artists. And you just have been, it's just very moving how over the years, how you've been, you just really celebrate and encourage the women around you, the contemporary, other contemporary artists. And that's when other people can cling so tightly to their own work and their own stuff and don't want to, just are so afraid of losing it or losing their something. You're so open and open-armed about that.
Did you always have an intention to try to teach or to connect to people in that way?
I didn't start teaching online until I had scarcity as my motivation, because I was encouraged trying to teach online, and I was like, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but I just gone through a divorce, and I was rock bottom to the point where I had to borrow my sister's credit card to send a newsletter about my class. I was like, okay, I have to do this. I feel really shy. This is not something natural that I would be recording myself on film for the world to see.
Right.
Because most artists are introverted, right?
Yeah.
So it got really dire, and then I launched a class based on my first painting book called Daring Adventures in Paint. And the next day, 100 people signed up, and then like a week later, it was like 300 people had signed up. And so I think I had cultivated over time, without realizing it, an audience through social media and my newsletter. Yeah, it was amazing. Suddenly, I had $35,000 in my bank account, and I was able to like live. And after 6 months of grieving, it was really pivotal. So sometimes things have to get really hard before you do something that is really brave.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't necessarily a natural fit, but I love collaborating, and I love people, and I feel fed by that work also, and feel like I'm sure you guys can talk about this too, but I always feel like I learn so much when I teach art retreats from the other students too, and feel energized by that.
Did you start doing art retreats shortly after you started teaching classes, or did that not come till later?
When did that start? Well, I had taught some in the US, and then that had been organized by other people. And then I did one in Italy with my friend who Kelly Ray. And then I was talking to a friend who I had met at a retreat at the Squam Arts Retreat in New Hampshire. And she had asked if I wanted to teach in Costa Rica. And it was just like a clear, like, hell yes, let's do it. And so that's where we started organizing art retreats. This will be our 7th in Costa Rica, and we've done 4 in Morocco and 1 in Mexico. And
that's awesome.
But it's been really wonderful to be able to like organize it and have, pretty much dream up what our ideal itinerary would be.
Yeah.
So of all these things, what do you think is the most filling of them, of the travel, connecting with other people, being able to teach, making your own artwork?
I think making my own artwork is the thing. I was just having this conversation with my boyfriend, who was like, you need to do something that's scalable, like the online classes. And because I've been in the studio a lot painting. And I was explaining, like, the painting fills me up to do everything else. Like, I can't get excited about teaching painting if don't have a strong practice myself. You know what I mean? So that is definitely the key to making it all work.
Right. For sure.
Do you relate to that?
Not right now in my life. I think there's been a shift. Yeah, I think that I literally think I made so much art that my body's like, can't do it, won't do it. Partly, no. I mean, I just made so much work, and I mean, a lot of work. And I feel like there's been a shift, a natural, peaceful shift into being more of a mentor, guide to others and help. And like, I don't want to see more of my stuff. Plenty to look at. I want to see other people's work. So I think it's helpful for me, even because I don't feel I'm competing with my work versus my artwork versus my teaching. So I think I try not to judge it and like thinking I should be creating. I'm like, I shouldn't be.
Right.
Making out with Sean is what I should be doing.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's other things besides
riding a motorcycle or something. So no, I think that's just that, and I think that's natural after 20 years of it. And we'll probably all be in phases too. There'll probably be a phase, a year and a half from now, where I'll start to want to be creating something big and maybe do a film or collaborate on some installation. I don't know what, but
absolutely. I think there are seasons.
Yeah,
for sure. I think our relationship to art changes too. Like it serves different purposes at different times in our life. Like I think right now art is definitely something that feels essential to me to kind of ground myself. Whereas in the past it felt more like intellectually stimulating, like something that was a pursuit of improving myself. And there have been times in my life where I felt like it was more a way to connect with other people, and like it, it's a tool, it's an avenue, it's a way to kind of, meet your needs at different points in your life.
Absolutely. I feel like for me, it's very weather contingent, maybe because my studio is half outside. It's like 100 square feet. It's tiny. And then I open up the doors and I have the yard. So
Nice.
the weather has been strangely beautiful. And so that has made me want to create a lot. But when it's cold and rainy out, I don't feel like it.
Do you have books or yeah, I'll let you take the lead on that.
I have a couple painting books. The one I mentioned, Daring Adventures in Paint, and then I have e-courses based on those. And I'm running one again right now, Daring Adventures in Abstract Paint. And I feel like the energy of seeing people's paintings and all of that has been filling me up from the classes lately, which is exciting. And yeah, I have a bunch of classes. Another one is a watercolor class called In the Flow, and it's taught with my friend Faith, who I teach the art retreats with. And during the art retreats, we started experimenting more with watercolor because it's like lighter instead of bringing huge suitcases full of canvases and acrylic. And it was just, and it would explode. And so we're like, let's try using watercolor. And people really ran with it. And we started doing these watercolor warm-ups, which were basically, taking in, when we're in Morocco, the colors of the rooftop in Morocco. And I'm using my hands, but like just doing stripes of color. And we're still doing mixed media and other things at that time. But then we realized how much people were getting out of the watercolors and how it was great because it was unconventional. It wasn't the normal, landscape watercolor, the fussy layering process. It was really just like capturing the local color. So that's been something that we have a class called In the Flow. It starts in April.
So coming up, you've got a lot. That's a lot going on.
Yeah. I feel like that's a practice that when I do it too, it feels very meditative, and it's just like if I only have 15 minutes to make something, it's a good way to do that. But yeah, I was saying this earlier, but I feel like, Trent, if you have an idea for an online class, I want to see that happen.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of ideas. I think I get overwhelmed really easily just thinking about how to pull it off, how to frame it correctly, how to get it,
What was it, Sabrina, that helped you like pull the trigger on it? Like mine was destitution, but
yeah, I think, well, you were so helpful with just encouraging me, like it can be done. And I mean, I was just daunted. It was daunting to me for 6 or 7 years. I think when I realized I could just make it my own random way, I think you encouraged me to like just do your way. It doesn't have to be this official, you're teaching this specific technique, and how to evoke. And so my challenge was, how do I translate the evoking and inspiring in a natural way through
right. And that's what people want, is they want to connect with the way you do it.
yeah.
What would you want to teach, Trent?
I just love exploring new materials and messing around with how different materials can interact with each other and how different techniques can build on each other. So I think a mixed media course generally, and then some smaller, more specific courses about specific media, like resin or oil painting or acrylic, whatever the case may be.
There's a gold mine in there. I was thinking today about you, Trent, with your courses. I'm like, just start and then find out each week as you go, like start with everyone in Room in the Trees who wants to take Trent's course, and we'll all be like, yep, me, and sign up, and then just week to week, and we find out what you teach more about the next week. And
right. And you are a teacher by profession and seem like you have deep knowledge. And I think there's a hole there, like at least in the e-courses I've seen, where people have knowledge, but not like in specific techniques, like resin, for example. Like that sounds awesome. Like, and I think you could really fill a niche. And
I
so,
can teach it well, not just know about it, but be able to really teach it about it.
mhm,
They're like, yeah, I work with resin. I'll do a course about it, but they don't really know how to be a teacher.
exactly.
And I think Trent's ability to give feedback, and I think a course that was involved really with student involvement would be so great.
That would be, it would be fantastic. And maybe I think there's something to this idea that you have to hit a breaking point of some kind, to push you over that
Mhm.
final little bit of resistance. And
Right,
kind
to
of
just
feel like
kind of get over yourself and realize
yeah,
it's not going to be perfect, especially you were saying like you are very technical and you know it could be even better. But I think each time you run the course too, you have the ability to iterate and make it better too. So it's just getting the first course out. Like you've done
right.
that, right, Sabrina? You're running another course. You figure out how you like to do it best.
Yep.
Yeah.
Liberate. Yep. Liberate
And
2.0.
it's so interesting to hear you guys hear you guys talk about, you just got to get that first one out. And like, these are ideas that I've taught in art classes, as long as I've been teaching art, like it's the same concept where it's like, you just got to get started. You just got to get over that, whatever that barrier is in your mind that keeps you from, creating, or at least, just putting one foot in front of the other. But so intellectually, I understand that, like, that principle, but for some reason in this particular context, it's like it's so hard for me for some reason.
Could you have someone video you while you're teaching, when you're naturally teaching a class, and
I've
have that?
tried that, but
Yeah.
it didn't work out so well. I think I don't know. I don't want to make this about me, but I think it's the more I watch, like, what Sabrina has done and what other people have been able to accomplish online, the more I'm starting to recognize, like, things that resonate with me, and what I would like to accomplish with my teaching in terms of, like, an attitude or a personality,
Yeah.
and how that can be communicated via, video or audio, or whatever the case may be. So I don't know. I feel like I'm getting to the point, but yeah, like I said, that's just that last little bit of resistance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be
Okay.
listening to the podcast, but I want to just support you. And
I know. I think we just, yeah.
Well, and with all sincerity, thank you both for saying that, because I think I definitely have some inner voices that, that tell me that, nobody's gonna be interested in that, like, no, nobody wants to, we all have those voices, right? The
Mhm.
suspicion or the fear that nobody's going to show up. So
Right.
it's good to get that, somebody actually
And
hearing a voice say that I'm interested.
every time I do a new course, I have that same voice. It's less, but it's still there.
Mm.
So it's similar to every time. If I haven't painted in a while, like when I see a blank canvas, I feel like, I don't know if I have anything to say.
Mm. So we've talked about the stuff that you're involved with, the classes, the books, the trips, the
And I just want to talk about
retreats.
The Bachelor.
There's the truth. But before we jump back into The Bachelor, we haven't talked about your personal artwork. What kind of art do you make? What
Yeah,
are you excited to? What kind of mediums
I
do you use? And
I talked about watercolor, but also acrylics are my jam. I love how they dry so fast and you can layer up. And just the vibrancy of the colors. And I'm looking around my studio and I have 100 paintings going. Yeah, I love abstraction. And I think, like, back when you and I shared a studio, Sabrina, I was
Yeah.
doing some of that work. And then it sort of morphed because I had this passion for children's books. I was doing that. And then I had a licensing and illustration agent, Lilla Rogers Studio, for 7 years, and was doing a lot of commercial work. And now I've come back and I'm doing more work for the e-courses, but also just for myself and hopefully, for the world at large. I definitely have pivoted a lot based on so many factors, but like what's feeding me both financially and just what I'm excited about. And currently that's abstraction.
And The Bachelor.
And The Bachelor.
And The Bachelor.
Yeah.
Abstractions based on The Bachelor.
That would be good. Based on that was happening.
Oh, you guys have to do that. I would love to see like both of you do a series, based on The Bachelor. That would be so much fun.
God.
I know you have to go, Sabrina. Mady, do you want to give us any words of wisdom as a sign off?
What can I say? I don't know. This has been, thank you. I've arrived now that I've been on Room in the Trees.
That's right.
I love it.
Yay. Thank you, Mady. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for being such an awesome friend and woman and artist and contemporary.
Oh, thank you.
You're in the world.
And I look forward to meeting you in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah! Oh my gosh.
See you on the dance floor.
Yes, totally.
Definitely.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at Sabrina Ward Harrison and at Trent Reynolds Art.
And check out the show notes at roominthetrees.com, where you can also get in touch if you have any ideas you'd like to share.
If you like this podcast, please consider showing your support. You can become a subscribing patron at patreon.com/room.
Please help us grow our audience by rating us or writing a review on iTunes. To do that, you can use the link roominthetrees.com/iTunes.